Howdy, howdy. Today I want to take a look at acid shells and specifically the synergy it has with Saryn. My favorite thing about Warframe is the buildcraft aspect, and I haven't seen this specific synergy brought up before, so I thought it would make a good topic to practice video editing. Hopefully this gives you some new ideas and builds to try out. So what is acid shells and why does it work with Saryn? Well, unfortunately, Acid Shells is an augment mod for the Sobek. The Sobek is an automatic Grineer shotgun that you'd be forgiven for having overlooked. It has a low fire rate, abysmal reload speed, and pitiful crit stats. However, it does have a fair base damage and pretty good status going for it. However, these slight redeeming qualities don't really help the Sobek overcome the other automatic shotguns that are competing with it, specifically the Kubicomb, and especially at higher levels. Acid Shells, on the other hand, sounds great on paper. It causes enemies to explode on death, dealing 45% of the enemy's max health as corrosive damage to all enemies in a 15-meter radius. This explosion can chain between enemies, proccing acid shells on any enemy it damages. Since the damage scales based on enemies' health, it does well against infested and can even do okay against the corpus. Unfortunately, armor pretty much negates all of the explosion damage, and this mod doesn't usually work well in practice, especially at medium or higher levels, since proccing the explosion actually requires that you kill an enemy with the Sobek, which is not easy at all. Thankfully, Saryn is well equipped to negate several of the weaknesses of the Sobek and allow acid shells to do some work. Saryn can strip enemy armor, buff her weapons, and increase the damage of the acid shell's explosions, mitigating most, if not all, of the weaknesses discussed so far. Acid shell's explosion damage can be boosted in several ways. Faction damage mods will increase it. Enemy debuffs, such as Nova's Molecular Prime or Garuda's Seeking Talons, and certain damage buffs, specifically Xata's Whisper, Rhino's Roar, and Saryns Toxic Lash. Now, Rhino's Roar works in the same way as the faction damage mods, but Xata's Whisper and Saryns Toxic Lash both deal a separate instance of damage, either Void or Toxin. Now, the Toxin damage from Toxic Lash has a guaranteed Toxin proc that will tick away at enemies' health, and any enemy killed by this Toxin proc will then explode, passing along the Toxin proc to the next Grineer in line. This allows acid shells to spread fairly well in crowded maps and works wonders against the corpus due to the damage bypassing shields. In this footage, I'm using a Saryn built for Toxic Lash with Rhino's Roar subsumed in place of her second ability. I'm also using the augment for her one just as a way to increase the damage of the Sobek enough to actually get kills. With spores stripping armor and acid shells explosions going off all over the place, this can be a really fun build to take on the steel path if you're looking to mix it up. Note that literally any melee weapon is probably more powerful, but if you are looking for an interesting synergy to play around with, this is one that seems to work pretty well. Note that this chain reaction will also work with Garuda's Seeking Talons, using the guaranteed slash procs to jump between enemies. I found that it was a little too difficult to keep up in practice, since it requires all enemies to be marked, and recasting Seeking Talons over and over takes forever. Xata's Whisper can also spread Void status procs to all enemies in range of the explosion, but since Void status doesn't do any damage, it's not super useful for this specific strategy. I will show the builds I'm running really quickly, although I haven't optimized them at all, and you should build your own stuff however you like. My Saryn build is focused on strength and duration, with a little survivability thrown in. She's still pretty squishy in the steel path, but it works out alright. My Sobek has a completely unnecessary rivet on it that helps the antique rainbow build I have going. Note that a faction damage mod would help the explosion damage of acid shells if you're into that sort of thing. I don't think I have any of them ranked up, to be quite honest, but you can try it out and see how it works. I hope you found this useful and interesting. I will leave you with some footage of me painstakingly setting up the simulacrum for that sweet chain reaction shot. Anyhow, it's been a fun experience trying out this video making process. Adios.